Is the Fuji X100V worth the hype? In short, yes. Stick around, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this and why I think every single creator should have one in their kit, regardless of the system they're shooting on. I got my first Fuji camera about 7 years ago, and arguably it was a weird thing because I really wanted one for probably a few months before I finally got it. And when I made the trade, I was at the time selling off a bunch of Nikon equipment, did a direct trade across the board for an 85-1.4 for an X100T. It was the weirdest situation. I didn't really have full confirmation from the guy we were making the trade, and I literally was just like, yeah, let's do it, and sent him the lens, and he was like, oh, okay, and thankfully was a reasonable person and sent me the camera. From the moment I got that camera in, I was absolutely hooked. The ergonomics of it were absolutely stellar. I love that small rangefinder design. Autofocus wasn't great, but more on that later. They have improved it drastically to the X100V. That camera for me was this idea of releasing myself from the concept of too much gear when traveling. I, back in 2013, traveled to China for 5 weeks, and I brought a backpack filled with about 35-40 pounds of camera gear and literally one extra change of clothes. In retrospect, I probably should have done it the other way around and had probably 3 or 4 changes of clothes and significantly less camera gear. I would have enjoyed the trip a lot more and probably been able to go more places. All that aside, the Fuji X100V, the modern version of this X100 series camera, is absolutely stellar. And here's a couple reasons why I think it should be in everyone's kit. It's capable. It has more than enough resolution at 26 megapixels. Dynamic range is fantastic, arguably better than pretty much every Canon camera on the market. Video shoots DCI 4K only for 15 minutes, so it's not going to be your all-day run-around camera, but it does have a built-in ND filter, so that makes it actually really usable in most situations when you're trying to get the best image quality and, don't want to be stuck at f11. Colors straight out camera. I mean, it's a Fuji. We think we've all come to expect at this point that Fujis are going to have fantastic colors, and the film simulations are something that are extremely fun to be able to play with because it's something that you can, really dial in your look, and there's so many options. I feel like if more cameras had this ability, we would be, seeing more people shooting straight to JPEG than, all of the Lightroom, Photoshop, Luminar, all of this over-processing of images, which, it has its place, and that if that's part of your style, more power to you. But I think for me, as someone who gets in love with the story and the idea and the concept of documenting things, the last thing I want to do is be spending hours and hours behind a computer trying to perfect my image to be absolutely perfect. I want to try and get it as close to the end product straight out of camera as humanly possible. This is one of the things that drew me initially to shooting on the Panasonic system cameras because of their V-Log LUT library. There's a lot of built-in looks that can really get you close to your finished product straight out of camera. All that being said, as you can probably guess, being on Panasonic, I haven't had autofocus for years, and so that's where the Fuji actually comes in really well. While it's not the most perfect autofocus system in the world, I created this little Frankenstein camera rig, and I actually used this for a one-shot walk and talk thank you video for my mother-in-law's business.
Hi Hi there, neighbor. I just wanted to pop in to say thank you, not only from me, but from Casper and my Cat's Meow crew for your order. I'd like to take you on a tour behind the scenes, how your items come to be. This is our final step in the process. This is where we print the front and the back of your piece. This is Rolanda and Donna, who runs Rolanda. But let me show you also how the order gets started. Once you place your order, my lovely ladies here at the workshop put your order in and make sure that everything is correct and ready to go. It's sent to design department where our designers make the final touches, and this is also where Casper is perfectly placed by each designer on the design. Once that's made, production, as you saw it, is done, and then it's ready to get boxed, and in no time at all, your order is boxed and ready to go. And from everyone here at the workshop, we thank you for your order, and I know you will enjoy celebrating the memories inside as you open it.
While you can see the autofocus isn't perfect in that video, one of the things that is pretty stellar about it is the size and weight. And being able to pair that with a gimbal, it's something that I could see walking around with all day long. I kind of have wanted to try and use this for like shooting a wedding video as like a stealth situation. I love the idea of being able to just have something quick to, pick off those shots and throw something together as like a quick little highlight film. Unfortunately, the overheating prevents that. All this to say, I absolutely love the X100 series, and I, at this point, have now had one version of it for at least 6 years. And I would say I've taken some of my favorite photos on this camera. It's something that goes in my bag every time I travel anywhere, and it's something that I cannot recommend highly enough as just an everyday carry camera. I think as photographers and filmmakers, one of the things that we can get jaded with over time is this idea of always having to carry equipment with us to create the images we want. And letting go of that quality that we would expect to get from a higher quality camera and just, shooting on our phone, which they're getting good, but they're not quite at that level and simplicity of just shooting on a regular camera. And so I think being able to have something small enough that you can justify bringing with you everywhere, not to mention the whole thing charges over USB-C, so it's not even like I have to bring extra chargers with me. I've already got my charger for my laptop, ready to rock and roll. It's something that there's just no excuse to not bring it with you. And I think that's like a common theme that I'm going to keep coming back to, is this idea that, I want there to be as little resistance as humanly possible between me and the creating that I'm doing. And if I want to document a vacation or something, I want there to be as little friction between me and that documentation process. I don't want to be taken out of the moment to have to document that moment. And the X100V, in my opinion, is one of the fastest ways to be able to do that and not have to think about it too terribly much. Factoring in, this is something I just learned recently, and it took a little bit of time playing with it, but it was definitely worth dialing this in. And that is the way that Fuji artificially creates more dynamic range out of that sensor. So if you're a filmmaker, you understand that your native ISO in a log profile is usually going to be something that's not 100. Usually it'll be somewhere between like 400, 640, 800, somewhere in there. I think the new Fuji cameras in F-Log2 are at like 1250, which is quite a bit higher. But what that allows you to do is have significantly cleaner shadows and also protect a lot more of those highlights using a log curve. And in Fuji JPEGs, they have a setting, dynamic range. I think they have like 200 or 100, 200, and 400%. 400%, you have to be at 640 ISO as your base, but using that built-in ND filter, I've been able to find like that's totally fine for me, and I use it almost exclusively, shooting at 640 and somewhere around like 2.8 to f4, somewhere in there. And I find that the images I'm getting out of it are crazy sharp. They've got so much dynamic range, it doesn't even make sense out of an APS-C camera. And the colors are just, they're ready to go, rock and roll. I have the little lightning to SD card reader for my iPhone, and I will just, as soon as I get home from a day of exploring, pop that SD card in, load them onto my camera, and I've got all my JPEGs ready to go and post to social media. And if I want, I shoot JPEG and RAW, so I can have those RAW files to back up, archive, and revisit down the road if I really want to like get the most out of them. But I'll be honest, I haven't touched those RAW files in probably like 3 years, so maybe it might be time just to switch to JPEG only and call it a day. Not quite ready to commit to that. The resolution and quality snob in me, that's not something I'm quite ready to embrace, but maybe someday I'll get there. The final piece to the puzzle with the X100V that I think is arguably one of its biggest selling points that most people miss, and I absolutely love it from a like stealthy standpoint, in terms of being able to be quiet, move around, not disturb too much, is the leaf shutter on the X100V allows you to sync a flash up to the max shutter speed in mechanical, which I believe is 1/4000th of a second. I'll put it on screen if it's anything else. This is absolutely insane because when you think about using a flash or overpowering the sun or anything like that, it's something where you're constantly having to battle the amount of power output, and you want to be at like f11, and you're maxing out your shutter speed at 2/50th of a second, ISO 64 if your camera can do it, and it still is such a hard thing to do. Whereas now I have a Godox V1 flash that I use for weddings, and I can just get the Godox trigger for Fuji, and now I have a small portable studio setup that can basically go in a back pocket. Okay, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's very, very small. We're talking small sling bag size portrait on the go kit to be able to produce super high quality portraits. It makes it super easy to control the light to whatever degree you want to, because you can leave your aperture open to like f2, f4, somewhere in there, or even better yet, combining it with the dynamic range 400, base ISO of 640, and that built-in ND filter, you are basically set to shoot in any scenario whatsoever, and it's like super easy. This is going to be a little tip that I have not been able to find anywhere else on the internet, but that button right there can be mapped to use as a switch between your exposure simulation and natural live view. If you shoot with flash on pretty much any other mirrorless camera right now, one of the things that they do so well is they will expose everything as simulated. So, you know, when you're shooting at 5.6, ISO 100, 2/50th of a second shutter speed, but you're like at a wedding on the dance floor, it's going to be pitch black. You can't see what you're doing. They will artificially boost the exposure using the ISO so that you can see what you're shooting, focusing all of those things. But then when you take the photo, it will automatically drop back down to those original settings, take the photo with the flash, all of the things. On Fuji, it's a little bit more complicated than that because you have to go into what's called natural live view, where it turns off all exposure simulation and just shows you the world in the best way possible. If you map it to that button, you just hold it down for like, I think 1 second, 2 seconds, somewhere in there, and it will switch between exposure simulation, natural live view. So you can put your flash trigger on there, change it to natural live view, pop off a few shots, switch it back, take off your flash trigger, and you're ready to go. This makes it absolutely insanely fast to work with, and I think it's definitely an underrated feature of the X100V that I haven't seen anyone else talking about. Okay, so this video was quite a bit. I don't know how long it will be in total, but I hope that some of the things that I talked about and some of the sample photos and videos that you were able to see from this have convinced you that it might be worth it to think about investing in the X100V as an addition to whatever camera system you're shooting on, just as that camera to carry around with you every day and get out and practice shooting. I think that as a creative, it works best in our favor when we can spend the most amount of time getting out, practicing our craft, putting in those reps, getting better at what we're doing, rather than, you know, sitting on YouTube all day, which I'm just as guilty of as the next person, trying to learn things when the reality is we need to go out and apply those things. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you would like, please like, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.